I find oftentimes what happens is our clients don't have clarity on how they help people, who they help, or they think that because things are basic to them, that they're basic to everybody else. For example, the client I was literally just talking to before getting on this podcast, where she's helped governments get their systems and their processes and their teams together. And I'm like, well, why don't you go do that for this underserved market over here of small businesses? They need you, like they're desperate. And she's like, wow, I didn't realize that that was something I could actually do. Like, it's so easy to me. I didn't realize that this was something that was that valuable.
This is the Morning Tempo Podcast. I am your host, Rabanzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with business owners and the entrepreneurial with the slant toward creativity. It's an opportunity for you to learn with me from people who are finding success in the business world, all intended to make your entrepreneurial journey a little bit easier. Welcome to another episode. It is a sunny, windy, warm day in Panama today at the beach. I hope your weather is great. How are you doing? Good, I hope. I am looking forward to counting down the days for our big move to Querétaro, Mexico. Don't get me wrong, Panama's been wonderful, and we will return. We will remember our time here forever and the view we have right now of the ocean. But yeah, we're looking forward to the new beginnings in Querétaro. So that's coming up at the end of March this month. Just counting the days, coming fast. My guest for this episode is Amanda Abella. She is helping entrepreneurial women gain clarity on the markets they can best serve. She's a recruiter turned freelance writer turned personal finance coach turned sales coach. She's an entrepreneurial type. We didn't get specifically into the creative aspects of what she's done to start her business. And this is something I love exploring, the creative aspects of how businesses get going. But regardless, she came across as a highly creative person, an entrepreneur. She did create her business out of thin air practically. Actually, she did it with a combination of experience, confidence, and mentorship. Go figure. She is a fireball, or firecracker, I guess is the right word, expression. From what I could tell, and based on our conversation, yeah, she's a firecracker. She is all about helping women build high-ticket service businesses, and I believe in reassuring them of their capacity for independence. Maybe world domination, I think. That could be in there too. In this conversation, Amanda and I cover her humble beginnings in sales. She gave me her insights into the Great Resignation, which I call the mass workplace exodus, a topic of interest to me. We also talk about her sales training program, her podcast, which is called Make Money Your Honey. We also talk about her potty mouth. She drops a lot of F-bombs, by the way. You've been warned. And how women can get more comfortable selling and charging more. More comfortable selling and charging more. That's more than I needed. And also about one of her most memorable mistakes, which was a lot of fun. Yep, she's a firecracker. She's a great conversationalist, actually. I was so appreciative of that because she was an easy edit. She doesn't use a lot of filler words like yours truly and like most of my guests. No knock on most of my guests, but Amanda's very good. Amanda, if you're listening, you're very good. I really enjoyed speaking with her. Please enjoy my conversation with Amanda Abella. Amanda, thank you for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure's mine.
Absolutely. I was listening to the latest episode of Make Money Your Honey podcast, episode 216 today. Congratulations. That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing it for a while. It's gone through a lot of iterations.
I can understand that. Actually, this one has as well a story for another time, I guess, and I have another one that has over 250 episodes. So I feel for you, and you've done a lot of work. I admire that you've hit that point. Tell me about the format these days. Like, what's the frequency? It sounds like you do some interviews and some solo things, and what's sort of
it kind of depends on what's going on, to be honest, because, for example, I would really love to do more interviews. We started doing a lot more of those this year. But then, things kind of shift and change in the business. And I'm like, okay, we got to put a pause on this for now. So it's going to be solo episodes for a while. So right now there's nothing set in stone. if that makes sense. And then next year, we're probably in 2022, we're probably going to experiment because we have YouTube videos coming out now. We're developing the YouTube channel. So we might experiment with turning those into podcast episodes. The podcast is just kind of like a giant experimentation for me at this point.
Well, it sounds good. I mean, you have command of the mic. I thought it was entertaining, and you swear a lot. At least in the last episode.
Swear a lot and people love it. And I swear I close 70% of sales because I swear. People are like, we love that you curse. You just give us permission to be ourselves. I hear that from women all the time.
That's great. I was laughing. Usually when that happens on here, somebody will slip and say, oh, I'm sorry, can we say that? And of course I'm like, yeah, you can say whatever the fuck you want.
Oh yeah, I tell my guests ahead of time, I'm like, drop as many F-bombs as you want. I don't care.
Because you're probably going to be the first one, right?
Exactly. I was like, I don't care.
So how often are you publishing episodes, by the way?
Once a week.
Okay. Yeah. God, that's a lot. That's a lot. But I figured you may have been because 200 some episodes. That takes a while.
Well, it's been since 2016 and it's been through some hiatuses. In the beginning, it was more personal finance. Now it's more business. I mean, it's kind of cool because you can kind of see the transition I've been through in the last, basically since I started it. I think when I started the podcast was when the big transition started happening, and I was already in the process of being like, do I want to do the first business? No, not really. Are we moving into something else? So the podcast has kind of documented all of it, and it's kind of cool.
Oh, good. So is that the change of business you referenced earlier? I wasn't sure if that was change of business climate or change in your business.
Change in my business. I was a financial writer for 8 years. I'd built a whole brand as a financial expert. And around 2016, when I started the podcast, that's primarily what it was. I was interviewing a lot of people in the personal finance space. I still do because I have so many friends in the space who are doing amazing work. But at some point, there had to be hiatuses and things because I was like overworked and not making enough money. And I was like, I think we got to change this business model. And then I was like, what can I do? Oh, people have been asking me how I built the first business. Let me turn that into a training program. That turned into the first iteration of our Persuade to Profit program. This was 2017 when we launched it. I made $10,000 cash in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, I think I found the thing. And it's been a journey of just a year later, I quit all my freelance writing clients just like in one day because I'd gotten into a discussion with one of my editors. And at the same time, I had someone in my DMs offering me 5 figures for private consulting. And I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
So, and then 6 months after that, I hired my first employee. And then the podcast is documented, that moment where things started transitioning up until now, where I have a multiple 6-figure business. I have a team. Our business grew 142% in 2021 from 2020. And, if you go back to the episodes from a couple of years ago, I had this series called Adventures in Scaling, where I was basically just bitching about how horrible scaling is. And people loved it because they were like, thank you for being so honest. And I'm like, yeah, this shit sucks. It really sucks to change business models. And it's excruciating sometimes, and people appreciate the honesty. So I guess I'm just going to keep giving it to them.
Yeah, that's good. And do you refer back to, for your listeners, do you refer them back to some of those earlier episodes now, or are you kind of leaning more towards letting them try to let them follow you on the new path, if you will?
I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, I'll definitely do it with like the interviews that we've had, I think I have one coming out in a couple weeks where it's like the best interviews of 2021. And there's also a strategy behind the interviews. It's because I want to meet really cool people and do business with them. So it's like a win-win-win-win-win all around.
Yeah. Good plan. Okay. So you mentioned quitting the freelancing gigs. And I think I pulled a quote. I'll call it paraphrasing, excuse me, because I pulled an article out of the quote. But since you talked about quitting the freelance jobs, I think this is in reference to quitting something else. But you said in an interview, I quit my job before I'd fully replaced my income from my side business. Honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. I budgeted the best I could, but truthfully, I went on a gut feeling that was telling me I could make more money on my own. Turns out I was right. Is that when you first went into freelance writing?
Yeah, so I've been freelance writing since 2010, and I was doing it on the side of jobs. And then in 2013, I quit my last job because I was a recruiter. I was interviewing people for jobs every day. And it's interesting with the whole great resignation stuff going on right now. I was like, oh, yeah, I saw these problems coming 10 years ago
What are,
when I was a recruiter.
hey, that's really interesting. I have to pause you there and tell me what insights you gained or what reflections you have based on the Great Resignation, as you call it. Because I'm a little, I don't follow it super hard, but I'm a little, well, I'm curious, obviously.
Everybody's curious about
Yeah.
why millions of people are quitting their jobs and not coming back. And, I've had people on my podcast tell me, oh, it's because of, government incentives. And I'm like, those expired months ago. So it's not that. That doesn't make any sense. And also, I'm in Florida. Like, there's even less shit here than maybe in California, where I know they've been, depending on the city, they've been trying to do some sort of legislation. So I'm like, no, it's definitely a lot more complicated than the government giving people money. That's not going to lie. That's probably been a part of it, but it's not the whole story. I think people just had a lot of time to reflect and be like, all right, life is short. We're going through a pandemic. People are dying. I'm being faced with my own mortality right now. And do I really want to be spending the rest of my life working in a place I can't fucking stand?
Yeah.
In a place that I'm not in alignment with the values, where the management sucks. So they've been in for a really rude awakening. I was actually just with a client right before here who's in our Persuade to Profit program. And she has a history of helping the federal government in Australia streamline their processes and their hiring. And she's gone off on her own for lots of reasons, but she's gone off on her own. And I'm like, there's a massive opportunity for you with small businesses in corporate America right now. They need you. So we were actually developing that for her and helping her develop that. And I think that's a part of it, and I think companies also have done a really shitty job and of making sure their employees are developed and they have a way to, they're out of touch. I mean, the CEO of Better last week just fired 900 people on a Zoom call.
That's crazy.
I mean, and I was listening to one of my mentors, and one of my mentors was like, I wouldn't have done it that way, but if you got to fire 15% of your workforce, you might as well just do it on one call instead of spend 3 weeks worth of resources when the ship's already sinking. You don't have that kind of time. The real problem is, why are you in a position where you got to let go of 15% of your workforce? Who fucked that up?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the real question. And he still gave those 900 employees severance. So he's like, you gave your bottom 10% severance. Yeah. So it's very interesting. There's responsibility. Like, the employees are having like rude awakenings. They're not in alignment with who they're working for. They want to work from home. My brother has he works for a company. They tried to make them go back into the offices, and there was basically a mutiny. And they're like, okay, we'll just go find another job then. And then finally the company gave in and was like, okay, everybody work from home now. So that's a part of it. I think companies have done a piss poor job of really developing employees and things. It's a topic I'm particularly interested in as I learn how to develop my own team right now. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm extra interested in it. It's like, okay, how do I not put myself into a position where I have to fire 15% of my workforce?
Yeah.
When I get there, what things do I need to know about, and what things do I need to put in place, and how do I develop them? So it's a lot of different things going on. And one of my employees, Zenia, actually was like, did you hear that they're also doing a great restructuring? And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, yeah, they're starting to lay people off like crazy, which is the better.com situation that we had. And I'm like, I'm surprised it took them 2 years. I would have started cutting the fat as soon as COVID hit.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to do it as soon as everything shut down. They were going to start cutting the fat, but I guess they waited 2 years. That's just me and my recruiter brain, like what I thought was immediately going to happen. But I guess it didn't. Maybe it would have looked bad PR. I don't know. Firing 900 people on a Zoom call is pretty bad PR too. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, but it's a very fascinating thing. The rearranging of the workforce going on right now is really interesting, and entrepreneurship's through the roof.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I don't suppose I've read a lot about this, but I'm not surprised to hear that much of it is reflection. And it just sounds like, from my last experiences with small startups, that maybe a trend that was already in motion just continued, perhaps got worse and worse. But certainly something like a pandemic, as we've had, gets you.
I think the pandemic just compressed it and made it happen a lot faster.
I can see that. Okay, well, cool. Got the expert insight there. I appreciate that. You mentioned Persuade to Profit 90-day sales training in passing there. I wanted to ask you if that's your latest offering course thing that, or I should say latest active one. Maybe you're developing something new, but how's it going? How long's it been around?
So Persuade to Profit's been around 5 years. It's been through a few iterations. It was like 6 modules when we started it. Now it's a full-blown 90-day sales training. And we were actually just developing like a 15-month version of it so people can get more sales training and more sales role play from us. But basically it's our signature sales training. And what we do is we will help small business owners and professionals who want to get into the training and coaching industry. We will help them create their curriculums and their training programs. Then we teach them how to market, and then we teach them like actual sales. Because a part of what I realized in the online spaces is a lot of people were getting a lot of marketing. They knew what to do with inbound leads, but they didn't really know how to sell. They didn't know how to do what I did in my first business, which was like pitch the shit out of yourself and go close some deals. You know, which
that was for writing.
That was for writing. Yeah. Okay. In the first business, they don't know how to do that. You know, we cater to women specifically because the guys have their mentors. They have the Grant Cardones, they have the Michael Burts, they have the Brad Lees, the Jordan Belforts. If we go, back, the Brian Tracy's. Who do the women have? Nobody. We have nobody. So I was like, great, I guess I'm going to take the mantle. That's what we're going to do. And it was a good choice because people are knocking down our door. It's a skill set people really, really need. And we have a very deep focus on that because we talk to women every week who've gone through all these business training programs designed for women and nobody taught them how to sell.
Well, thanks for that perspective. It's funny. I always think, God, women are always catering to women, it seems like, but it makes sense though. There was a big need there and still is. And I understand there are many reasons why it is that it's becoming increasingly popular. But the perspective of like, there are all these guys that have been doing this for a while and the guys have their mentors. And
I love them. My best mentors have been men. I love them. But I understand that sometimes women want to learn from women. It would have been nice if I could learn from a woman. It just wasn't available.
Sure. Where did you garner your initial sales experience? Because in my head, I was thinking, well, you went from freelance writing to sales, but that's not exactly right based on what you just said. So how did you get your sales?
I've actually been in sales since I was 20, but nobody told me, going back to that idea of companies having bad management and no real development programs. Yeah, I've been in sales since I was 20 and no one told me or developed me, and I had no formal training. They kind of just threw me in, and it didn't start clicking until I had to run my own businesses where I was like, oh,
what were you selling? What were you selling?
So I affectionately call it my first sales job. I was fundraising for an environmental nonprofit when I was 20. Man, if you can fundraise, you can sell anything.
I bet.
Yeah. Where I would ask people on Miami Beach and other parts of Miami on the street for money for this environmental nonprofit. But there was like no formal training, and they just kind of threw me out there. I did in my college, I did tours for tourists, which were basically for them to drop money in donations. Nobody told me. I had no idea. I had no formal training. And then I was a recruiter. It was still sales. It was just selling people on jobs.
Sure. Yeah. Recruiters. My wife was in that arena for a short time, but met a lot of recruiters because of that time she spent doing it. And they definitely strike me as salespeople.
Well, you know what? I was doing it and nobody told me I was in sales. And it wasn't until I hired my first coach. And then she goes, "You do realize that you sell at your job every day, right?" And I was like, "I do what?" What do you mean? So I didn't realize I'd been doing it for years. And again, there was no development program. There was no formal training. There was no real, it was just kind of like, go out there and just figure it out. So there was no dot connection for me until I tried to do stuff on my own. And then obviously with writing, I was pitching every day. That's sales.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then
Do you use that, do you realize thing with a lot of your students today that they've been selling and they,
Oh, it happens to a ton of people. I'm realizing. Yeah. Now in retrospect, I'm like, wow, this actually happens a lot. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the companies not really properly developing and training people. And then that's part of the reason why there's a mass exodus.
Sure. I can understand.
And bad management.
So that sounds like, that sounds like most of your humble beginnings, unless you want to add something, but I have a good
No,
segue
that's
for the next one.
basically all of it. Yeah, I think that's all of it.
Tell me, I gather this has been an interesting ride, maybe a hard one, going from that start to freelance writing, and then the I don't want to say, what's the right word? Not mutations, the evolution of your business and businesses. Are there any mistakes that you try to remember or celebrate or share or that you laugh about?
Oh God, so many. I was once rejected 60 times in 1 month trying to sell one-on-one coaching packages. That was back in 2015. In retrospect, I know everything I did wrong, but back then I didn't. That was brutal. That was really bad. And I kind of quit for a while. So I was like, I guess I'm just going to do the writing thing and ride this train until the wheels fall off. Until a year later when I realized I couldn't scale it. And then I was back at trying to sell coaching. But I looked at it from a different perspective of like, okay, I'm going to sell training. I'm going to solve a big problem, and I'm going to design something where I don't have to trade as much of my time for money. That was kind of the idea. I've definitely made hiring mistakes. I was a former recruiter, yes, and I still make hiring mistakes because it's a learned skill.
Hmm. Yeah. What's
Some
your
have worked, some haven't. It is what it is. That's actually something I'm really focusing on going into 2022. It's like team development and hiring and culture and all those types of things. Because there was no real culture when I hired my first employee. It was like, this grew really fast and it's kind of a shit show on the back end. Please help. That's what it was. And for a lot of people, that's what their first employee deals with.
Sure. How is culture development happening for you and your people now?
Yeah, so I think a part of it is getting really clear on what our mission is as a company. It sounds so fucking trite, I know, right? It sounds like a platitude.
It sounds
Sounds
like
like
a
a
poster I should
cliche.
have in the back here, maybe.
Sounds like a cliche. It absolutely sounds like a cliche.
But it's true, right?
But it's true that you need to have some sort of a bigger vision to be like, hey, people, come on board. Let's go. And a lot of companies actually don't have that very well mapped out. And that's one of the reasons why they can't retain people. I'm learning. I think another thing we've had to work on is like, okay, well, what is our value system as a company? I shamelessly stole these from one of my mentors. They said I could. So ours is inspiration, discipline, accountability, transparency, alignment, and results. So those are the things that we live by as a company and as individuals within the company. That's what we want for our clients. That's what we want for us. That's what we need to happen in order to reach our mission. And then it's like turning the mission into smaller goals and just being more specific about what those things are. I think for me, a lot of it has been getting more comfortable with numbers because I avoided them like the plague for a long time. So that was something I had to do and get comfortable with. And I think also just kind of owning the fact that, like, hey, Amanda, you're a high performer. Like, you didn't know, but spoiler alert, you're a high performer. I took one of my employees to an event. She realized she was a high performer. So it was kind of like, okay, this is what we're doing. And it's also just been getting more clear, I should say, on who it is we help and how we help them, because it really wasn't until 2020 when we were like, oh, sales training for women. That's it. That's the thing. And our business more than doubled in 2021.
So this is a stock question. I think it makes sense to ask here, but how can women get comfortable charging more money and selling?
I find oftentimes what happens is our clients don't have clarity on how they help people, who they help, or they think that because things are basic to them, that they're basic to everybody else. For example, the client I was literally just talking to before getting on this podcast, where she's helped governments get their systems and their processes and their teams together. And I'm like, well, why don't you go do that for this underserved market over here of small businesses? They need you, like they're desperate. And she's like, wow, I didn't realize that was something I could actually do. Like, it's so easy to me. I didn't realize that this was something that was that valuable. So I think that's a part of what goes on.
Yeah.
And lack of clarity. I'll talk to a lot of women. Okay, what do you do? I help women overcome their blocks and live their best lives. Great. What the fuck does that mean? What problems are we solving? I think that's a part of it. I think there's a lot of really fucking bad advice going around telling people to do beta programs for free, get your coaching clients for free. No, charge. We had a client make $17,000 in a week off of a beta program. So I think it's bad advice. I think that's part of it. And I think there's women deal with a lot. Everybody does, but for some reason it's extra with us with the imposter syndrome, where we're like, oh yeah, let me go get another degree, and then maybe I'll be worthy of charging, I don't know, 10% more maybe. And I think it's thinking too small, which I know I struggled with a lot. There's no, like, now I have these giant goals that I never would have even thought of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's a different level of awareness. And I think there's like some conditioning there. You know, I recently interviewed Barbara Hewson for the podcast, formerly known as Barbara Stanny, big deal in the personal finance space. And she wrote a book called Overcoming Under Earning. And in that book, she wrote, women have been conditioned to be liked instead of respected. You know, be the nice girl. Don't be the bitch. Oh, women are terrified of being called a bitch. That's part of it too.
Really?
Yeah.
I read somewhere that, and I know we're running out of time so we can wrap up here, but I read somewhere that a while back that where a guy will be quick to ask for more money, a woman will be quicker to help the guy, friend of hers, get more money, or, you know, support them rather than ask for themselves.
Lots of people out here building their boyfriends' businesses while they're letting theirs fall to the wayside, and then they get salty when the boyfriend breaks up with them. Yep, that happens. That's a thing.
Yeah. So you probably talk about that as well then, I would assume.
Not really, but I've seen it happen quite a lot. Actually, you know, it's a thing. It's real. Sure. You know, maybe we're good at support roles. Maybe we've been conditioned into support roles. I guess there's an argument to be made for that. But that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to train women. I've trained guys too, you know, and it's just, there's extra layers that we have to deal with our own relationship to money and power and being badasses that we there's some healing we need to do as women. So that was part of the reason why as well.
Got it. Well, I know that people can find out about all of your work and your offerings and training and some of the cool things that you help people with on your website, Amanda, and tell me if I'm saying it right, I should have asked at the beginning, amandaabella.com, or is it Abella? It's
Abella.
All right.
Good job. You picked it up on it. Yes.
Well, you know, I thought you might have gringo-fied it or something, but amandaabella.com. I will have that in the show notes for those who don't want to try and figure out how to spell that. And I know all your socials there. It's a great website. Amanda, it was a pleasure. Did we forget anything that you were just dying to say today?
No, I think we basically covered everything. Thank you so much for the insightful questions. And, you know, I hope your audience gets a lot of value from it. And the honor was mine.
I know they will, and I think it's going to be an award-winning episode. Thanks for your time. If you've listened to this podcast before, you may have gathered that Morning Tempo does web design, specializing in functionality, user experience, and security. If your business or nonprofit is thinking about a new website or redesigning the one you have, contact me for more information. You can find my contact info at morningtempo.com. I'd be delighted to discuss your project, answer questions, provide a quote. I'm here for you. Again, visit morningtempo.com to contact me about your next website project. Please help other creative entrepreneurial types find this podcast by following us and or rating it on your favorite audio platform of choice. It really does help. If you like what I do on this podcast and would like to help me do more with the podcast, please sign up for the Morning Tempo Insiders community newsletter. You can do so by visiting morningtempo.com. It's free. The newsletter and occasional email from me is filled with tips and insights for your creative entrepreneurial journey. It's based on experience, expertise, and knowledge of my podcast guests, various other marketing and sales pros that I follow, and personal research that I do for business. And you'll get details on the latest episodes of the podcast. Morning Tempo, the podcast, is made possible through the generosity of its listeners. If you love what I do here on the podcast, really love it, please visit morningtempo.com/crowd sponsor or the show notes for this episode to learn about options for offering your support. Again, that's morningtempo.com/crowd sponsor. All right, I am out. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao for now.